Everybody, Paul Campbell here with Core Group Portland. I am very happy to be here today with a longtime friend and somebody in the business, Mitch Freed. He is the owner of Gateway Property Management. There's the website up here above my shoulder. And as you know, we try and shoot these videos every now and again to educate you on your biggest, toughest real estate questions. And lately, we've been getting a ton of questions from our investor clients about how do you spot potential problems when it comes to finding tenants. And if you miss one, how do you get them out? So I got an expert on the line here with Mitch. And God, I got to ask you, you've been doing this for a really long time now. How many years has Gateway been around?
Oh, we've been around for almost 10 years.
Goodness gracious. Has it been that long? I'm getting old.
Yeah. I started out buying properties and held on to several as rentals. So before I managed properties for other people, I was doing it for myself. And I've seen a lot when it comes to, the kind of tenants that are out there renting properties. And I've made plenty of mistakes myself. So I know what it's like to get stuck with a problem tenant, and I know the headaches involved with dealing with that tenant throughout the life of the tenancy, and eventually either they move out on their own, and then bring problems after the tenancy through small claims or through an attorney, or they make problems during the tenancy through a habitability claim, and that gets expensive. And taking the steps to avoid that we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know sometimes. Some of the
potential
some of the
problems.
best looking tenants on paper do become bad tenants for one of many reasons. Many things in their lives can fall apart. You don't know. You can't predict. And usually having a rigorous inspection program during the life of the tenancy can prevent some things from getting worse over time that you would have never seen. And in other cases, screening criteria, having a solid screening criteria that you don't make exceptions on. And we're talking objective screening criteria, something that you set.
Not to interrupt, but you said not making exceptions. Isn't that pretty critical? Because you start making exceptions, don't you open yourself up for some litigation?
Well, if you're treating some tenants differently, some applicants differently than others, then you would be open up for a fair housing violation, depending on what exactly you're making exceptions for. But usually, if you stick to the objective screening criteria and set the credit score and the criminal history within the bounds of whatever jurisdiction you're in, because it can change based on city of Portland versus outlying cities, and it does get a little bit more complicated as time goes on, because the city of Portland is looking into some new ordinances surrounding screening criteria, which I would recommend anybody interested in becoming a landlord in the city of Portland look very closely at what the current ordinances that are in place and the proposed ordinances coming up surrounding screening criteria and security deposit reconciliations, because those are going to become a bit of an issue in the years to come.
Do you have a resource they could peek at? Is there a website you happen to know for reading that kind of information? I know you're up.
Portland. Yeah, so the city of Portland's website does talk about it, but there are some landlord agencies that I would recommend anybody considering becoming a landlord would join, either the Rental Housing Alliance or perhaps Multifamily Northwest. Both of those have good resources for upcoming ordinance changes and statewide laws. The most recent one being SB 608, which changed the game when it came to no-cause terminations and for-cause terminations on a statewide level.
Well, that brings me to kind of the part two of the question. Say you screw up and you end up with a bad tenant. What's the play there? How do you safely remove that tenant as efficiently as possible without putting your asset at risk?
Yeah, I mean, without really diving into the legalities and boring everybody on exactly what steps to take, I would say one, documentation of the tenant's behavior, whatever lease violations they are committing is big, and documenting the condition of the property pre-move-in. If you're inspecting during the tenancy, you're going to want to have good photos and good notes because you never know when you're going to need to bring those to court. So the last thing you want is to have a bad tenant that has an attorney and you have no documentation whatsoever to refute their claims.
Ooh.
And furthermore, if you want to rent a property out, you should at least know what it would cost you to have to get an attorney down the road if you ever needed one, what the hourly rates would look like, and which attorneys the landlords around town are using on a regular basis to defend themselves when tenants bring claims.
How does that work with you guys? When you're helping somebody with an eviction, you basically recommend an attorney and work with the attorney, right? Or do you guys try and tackle that yourselves as property managers?
We do not go into these situations unrepresented. The only situation where it would ever happen is if our client specifically did not want to hire an attorney, at which point we would have to step back because we couldn't reasonably help our client in that case without an attorney present. It just is not advisable, and the danger of that particular scenario becoming exponentially more expensive for the client is too great, because when you lose, if the tenant has an attorney and if they win, you're going to pay out their claim, but you're going to pay their attorney fees, and that's where the money is. It's in the tenant's attorney fees. That's where it gets really expensive.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've paid a few attorneys in my days. It gets kind of spendy.
Yes. Yeah. So when it comes to dealing with those particular cases, trying to handle things outside of a trial is really the most advisable thing. Most attorneys will say that going to trial is a bit of a risk, and it gets more expensive because not only are you're ultimately going to have to pay your attorney in most cases either way. You win or you lose, you still have to pay your attorney, because trying to chase the tenant after the fact for your attorney fees is not an easy task, and would probably involve more collection activity and more legal fees in the long run. And it is much easier to try and resolve these things before they get out of hand in a trial.
Yeah, and then you got to spend all your life's, blood, sweat, and tears and time trying to chase down those attorney's fees. Nobody's got time for that.
Exactly. And I think that anybody who is considering becoming a landlord should assume at some point during their time, no matter what property you buy, no matter how many times you rent it out, it's probably going to happen. You shouldn't ever go into this assuming you're never going to have to deal with a bad tenant. Never have to go to court. You'll never have to deal with a non-payment situation or a tenant caused damage situation. And so setting your expectations for almost the worst case scenario for any tenancy will usually leave you pleasantly surprised, because most people don't end up dealing with these things. But if you do, you just want to be prepared.
So as a property manager, you basically help people with the, I guess you would say, setting the stage, so that if it comes to that, you have all your ducks in a row, you have all your documentation, and that person wouldn't have to necessarily produce all of that because you guys help with, like, obviously the screening and all that, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. So we would be responsible for documenting property condition, documenting tenants, lease violations, and having inspections done throughout the life of the tenancy, so that if these things do come up, we are ready. As the property manager, we would be actually the ones showing up in court with the attorney to deal with a non-payment situation, a trial. The property owners do not need to be there because they can be represented by the attorney through the property management company.
Well, I'll tell you what, man, I know this is an educational video and it's not a plug video, but I'll plug you. I'd never, ever, ever own a rental property in Multnomah County without a property manager. it is complicated and it is rapidly changing. So I appreciate you taking the time to kind of give us a little lay of the land. One last question, because I know we're kind of going over time here, but do you have kind of a summary of the costs involved? I know you mentioned it, and it's probably our second biggest question. I didn't warn you about this, so if you don't have an answer, that's fine. But what the cost for no cause evictions, or how you would even do that in the state of Oregon? Wasn't that measure that you were just referring to earlier?
Yeah, so you probably should, if you wanted to terminate a tenancy that has been in place for more than a year, that is month to month in the state of Oregon.
You got to scratch them a check, right?
Yeah, there is some relocation assistance involved. If it's also in the city of Portland, it adds. There are two relocation assistance payments that have to be considered. One of them might, I believe, offsets the other, but these we get into the realm where we're talking about this particular type of termination that you would want to use an attorney for, and I would expect somewhere, the hourly rate being $250 to $300 an hour, and maybe it takes that attorney an hour to prepare your termination notice, in which case there is a particular qualifying reason outlined in the bill that you would want to review with the attorney to make sure that you can terminate on that particular basis.
So there are specific reasons that you are allowed to do that at all. So you have to review that. Got it. Well, that's complicated, man. So you rent out your house, you really got to be expecting to keep that as a rental for a while. You can't just boot somebody in and move back.
Yeah, I mean, I do. When we get calls from people who are considering buying a property to rent it out, the number one question I ask them is, how bad do you want to be a landlord in Oregon?
That's a good question.
Even more so in Portland. How bad? Because if your exit strategy is to sell this thing in a year or two, or you think you're going to get out of it very quickly, you might want to take a hard look at that particular investment strategy. So the exit strategy is key. If you're looking to hold the rental property for many, many years and have a cash flow, then that is an ideal scenario. Of course, not everybody is looking at it from that standpoint. So it is important in this climate to identify an exit strategy that you can be happy with. Because once you rent it out and the tenancy has been in place for over a year, unless the tenant gives you a notice that they're going to move out, the options for vacating the tenancy are fairly limited. It's a very narrow path to vacating that tenancy.
And this is an Oregon thing, right? There, for people who are watching this in other states, because there's a couple people floating around in our database that aren't from Oregon, they would need to check with somebody in their state, right? Because it's different everywhere.
That's correct. Yeah, I can only speak on Oregon. I'm only licensed in Oregon, so that would be what I can speak on.
Well, I'll tell you what, that's a good message regardless of what state you're in. Know your facts, ask yourself how much you want to be a landlord, talk to a property management company, talk to an attorney, get some costs nailed down so you can budget for it. Solid stuff, man. You probably saved somebody thousands of dollars, so I appreciate it. Anything you want to add in closing, or did we cover it?
No, I think that we'd be happy to help if you have anybody who's interested in becoming a landlord, even if they just want to call us for a rental estimate, or we'll do some research at no cost, free rental estimate, and if anybody that wants to actually hire us, we will happily waive our setup fee for them.
Oh, fantastic. All right. So you heard it here first, folks. If you mention the video, you get a free setup fee and some free rental comps. How do people get a hold of you? I got your website back here, but is there a good phone number or email address that would work for you?
Yeah. So office@gatewaypdx.com is our general email, and our office phone number is 503-303-8545.
What was that? One more time on the phone number. I think it cut out a little bit there.
503-303-8545.
Well, I've known you for a long time, and you guys do great work. I really appreciate you taking the time to shoot this video with us. There was a lot of gems in there. Hopefully somebody takes that advice, and makes a bunch of money being a landlord. It's tough out there, so get some good people behind you. Thanks again, man. Owe you one.
My pleasure. Happy to help.